Hello, class. Welcome to week 5 of my dissertation topic and research that I'm furthering with Sir Douglas Haig and the British Expeditionary Force in World War One. This week, I kind of want to segue into a different perspective of the man Sir Douglas Haig and his leadership style during the First World War. Uh, as my topic, I was kind of, or topic my, my heading for this week, I was kind of fidgeting around to see how I wanted to put it, but then I really started understanding the more I read on different topics or different research pieces, a lot of people saw Sir Douglas Haig as the bad guy, as a villain per se, because of the large amount of casualties that the British Army, you know, accrued during the First World War. Now, obviously, every other war prior to that, British soldiers were killed, but not on the scale that the First World War really brought into perspective. Another thing that really painted Sir Douglas Haig as the villain is the way society itself saw the British military, especially the British Army, not much the British Navy, because the British Navy was always in the forefront of all the people's mind because it's island nation, so the Navy was going to save the day, and the Army was just there to kind of mop up what the Navy didn't handle. So up until about the 1860s, 1870s, British society saw the service member as a disgrace, as not a very good job. Only drunkards and people who couldn't make it in society joined the army. So society saw the army as something like, oh, it's just there. Didn't really pay a whole lot of mind to it. Pay wasn't that great. Service was, like I said, kind of looked down upon. But up until the 1870s and past that, society started to change the way it saw its regular service members in the army. They had more pride in it, like, oh man, we have a really great force here. You know, we'll take some pride in it. So now you fast forward to the First World War, and you have thousands and thousands and thousands of young British soldiers dying, and they need to pin that on somebody. Well, how come it went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Well, that's what I wanted to focus on this week. Why was Sir Douglas Haig such or criticized so much for his actions in the First World War? And I picked out 3 pretty good articles that I feel that really paint the picture of the opposite. They had the critics saying, Sir Douglas Haig, he misled it here, or he didn't do this, or he didn't do that. But the articles I picked this week all dive into the same methodology of, well, you weren't there, you didn't know. Let's go off historical fact. Did he do it right? And it turns out Sir Douglas Haig did the best he could with a near impossible job. Uh, One of my articles by Marvel Sanders really dives into this notion that everybody thought Sir Douglas Haig was fighting a war of attrition. My force versus your force, whoever breaks first, that's who loses. Well, the British Army could never, withstand a war of attrition against the German Army. Germany just had more people. Their population was bigger than the United Kingdom, so there's no way that Sir Douglas Haig could have fought a war of attrition. So he really fights against that notion that he wasn't fighting a war of attrition. He was just fighting as any other general during that time fought. If you rewind, in the beginning of the war, let's say 1915, when you had the Gallipoli landings in 1915, the Dardanelles when the British forces tried to open up a second front against the Turks to relieve pressure of the Western Front, it was actually Winston Churchill who was orchestrating that with Lord Kitchener. But Churchill didn't get blamed for the failure of the Gallipoli landings. It was Ian Hamilton who was the commander at the time. They said they blamed him. Obviously, Ian Hamilton did some things that were against tactical doctrine, like that. But it goes to prove that you're not gonna. The British society wanted to blame somebody for something, and just like with Ian Hamilton, the Gallipoli landings, they also blamed Sir Douglas Haig from the Somme up until the end of the war by his leadership. Nick Lloyd writes a great article with Faith and Without Fear, the same methodology as Senator Marbles did, saying you weren't there. What happened was this, and historical research points to that. Sir Douglas Haig did the best he could with what he was facing, which was a lot. The British military going into the First World War was not prepared for a continental war. They just weren't. The British Army up to that point was geared towards another colonial warfare. Small battalions with regiments ready to mobilize throughout the world, not large standing armies like every other European country. So in closing, like this week, like a lot of the research methodology that I went through and saw was people needed to really understand and go into that historical research to see that Sir Douglas Haig did the best he could with the information he had at the time. And unlike any other general who lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, he was no different. So thank you.